Good morning, Scott here, known as Cantaloupe to some online, and I'm bringing a subject to you that's interesting to me. It might be of interest to you or someone you know, and that is an idea that I've touched on a few times in my videos, and I want to bring it up again with special emphasis. So the idea is that there is more than one way to look at property, like real estate property, land, and that is the way that we currently do it. We being Western society, pretty much the whole world right now. And then there's the other way that was being used before European settlers came to North America, which is a different geometry. And I want to talk about that. I also want to connect this subject with the idea that sometimes confirmation bias makes it hard to change. If you're familiar with confirmation bias, it's being biased towards the things that we have familiarity with and have confirmed, quote unquote, previously. That is to say that we fail to examine things fairly and accurately sometimes, or reevaluate them if it's something that we've already thought about or have been exposed to at length in the past. So anyway, the geometry I mentioned, and this is an insight that came about from my game development projects, my experience with mathematics in game development mainly, computer programming, and it's given me some experience and insight into different systems, different configurations and models for how things work in general, spatially, for lack of a better way to say it. There's a spatial configuration and a set of parameters or rules, if you will, that lend themselves to different situations, different realities, and turns out, here's the point, that the way we currently do this is by drawing lines around our property lines. You've probably heard of property lines, fences, right? They are extremely common and extremely influential, and it is taken for granted, taken as a foregone conclusion that there must be property lines. Hold on a second before you get angry about this. Um, Property lines, for better or worse, and I'm not even necessarily passing judgment on the idea, I'm saying that there are predictable um, conditions that go along with this. There's another feature that it becomes necessary and a requirement when you use this model of property. That is, all of a sudden, if you didn't already, you need a centralized authority to manage it. So what that means is property lines only work when they are recognized and agreed upon by all members, all parties of a community, of a town, whatever. The property lines sometimes prevent a dispute. This is an argument in favor of them when they are clear and agreed upon. I get that. So I want to go on record saying I understand. I understand the benefit, but there's an unexpected trade-off. So all of a sudden, you need a government now where you didn't just a second ago. If this is our only concern, there are other factors that may call into existence a government or centralized authority. But if we're just talking about this situation, a moment ago we had no need for a government, but now we do with the property lines, versus the older model, which doesn't involve lines around property. Hear me out. It involves points at which that property is located. It's a whole different model, and it's viable. First of all, it has been used for countless centuries and millennia and more. I don't know, but the Native Americans, while they had tribes and some of them were nomadic tribes within their communities, and we have archaeological evidence of this, and it just makes sense that your teepee or whatever would be the point at which you live, and there was a very soft boundary, if any, around your property. The difference is, now here's the real gem. Not only do you not necessarily need a centralized authority to manage a point-based real estate system, you have all of the sudden, when you regress to that or progress to that, maybe they were ahead of us, you have infinite land. Hang on a sec. Hang on a sec. Scarcity of land is part of a confirmation bias. It assumes that we must use property lines, which by design, this model runs out of space. You can only draw so many lines on a two-dimensional sheet of paper. It doesn't increase the size of the paper, and you can increase the number of lots by reducing the area per lot, if that makes sense. This is geometry. Or you can draw a point here on the paper. You can draw a point there. How many points can you draw on a piece of paper? Here's the difference. There's no limit. I mean, things get less sparse. They become more compact, but there's no mathematical limit. The more points you add to a line or a two-dimensional surface, you don't run out. You don't run out of area. You can just keep adding. And yeah, there's a realistic logistical limit to how great things can be when there's that many people. But let's look back real quick. I don't want this to be a long, sprawling video, but look back at history, European history, where this idea came from. England, France, Italy, Germany. All of these places were using the same stuff because they were in close proximity. They themselves had borders. Their countries had property lines. I think it helps to understand what gives rise to these ideas. The ideas shape the reality. So it was at the time, centuries ago or millennia ago, people were warring. People were raping and pillaging. There were Vikings. There were marauders, roaming bandits. It was hugely dangerous, and it was brutal. And the only way they could prevent people from, I should say, the only way that they were able to keep people safe to any degree was to band together, to draw a line around their area, which became, a city or a country, and defend it as a group. So here's the second reason why property lines come into existence, and therefore governments are needed. Defense, right? Defense, so that we can know who we are as a people, who we are fighting, most importantly. Who are we defending ourselves against? Which people are members of our property? So, I don't want this to be a huge video again, but in the example of the Native Americans, where you have tribes doing the same thing, maybe they're nomadic, maybe they're semi-not nomadic, or maybe they're permanent, but they have very few, if any, property lines around their towns and their individual properties. For whatever reason, it's just that's the way they did it. And suddenly you have a relief. Okay, now here's the main takeaway. There's a relief in the form of being able to effortlessly and without permission trade with other tribes, and expand, right? So that's the other one. You can grow your numbers without any kind of area or geometric problems, and this is huge. Okay, so infinite land, and you don't necessarily even need to buy or sell land. I mean, with due respect to people in the business, what if you didn't need to buy land? I mean, it sounds funny. This is the confirmation bias. If that sounds funny, it's the confirmation bias. No, it is, because you grew up in a place where all this stuff is common, but it wasn't always common. This is the part people have a hard time with. It was not always common here. So I'm going to keep making videos about this. It's really hard to fight the status quo, the things that people experience every day, just because we are inclined, humans are inclined to believe that their situation is that way for a reason, and sometimes it's for a bad reason, and sometimes it's for no reason at all, other than that's just how it happened. Sometimes, if you'll forgive the expression, shit just happens. And we have to be more, I'll speak for myself. I like to be more proactive. I like to be decisive and hopefully strategic about the way things are done in my sphere, so that I don't run into problems with running out of space, for example, and needing systems that can't possibly work, for example, needing systems that create war for no better reason than it's just a part of how they function. Well, I'm over 10 minutes, so if you have questions or comments, reach out to whitehotrobot@gmail.com. Thank you.